You're listening to How We Heal, the podcast. I'm Kir Noel, medical intuitive, your host. Our sponsor is the medicinebuddhawithin.com, intuitive training for all. Check out their website and be invited to the upcoming trainings. Now let's begin our show. Hi, everyone. Welcome to How We Heal, the podcast with Kir Noel. Today we have extraordinary, I'd say young man because we're the same age, about Billy Barnes. The long form of his name is William Joseph Barnes, but everyone knows him as Billy in the industry he occupies, which is theater. He is someone I met through the first person who did my podcast and various other fun events we attend. I've heard Billy share and speak with friends, myself included, and he has this sweet, sweet side. And maybe he fooled me. He looks like he's been and still is a production stage manager of long note, at least 25 years from my estimate, an incredible history of that kind of, intensity. I'm sure perfectionism at its best when it all comes together, all orchestrated by somebody behind the curtain. So it's almost like we're meeting the Wizard of Oz. So I want to welcome Billy and ask him to respond to my, kind of the query of this podcast, which is, how did you get to become who you are in the world today? Hi, Billy.
Hi, Kir. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. So do you want to kind of take us on a little journey about what happened in your life? What doors did you open to become who you are?
Well, it all started at St. Francis de Sales Catholic Grammar School and High School. I was 13, seventh grade. And I got cast in a production of The Sound of Music as one of the kids. Prior to that, I had seen the movie. The soundtrack rarely left our family turntable. We played it constantly. And my mother was very into musicals, not exclusively, but she loved South Pacific, all the Rodgers and Hammerstein movies. And she would take me to these different high school productions. I think it was Carousel and South Pacific. And I always sat there and kind of didn't really imagine being up there, but just felt very at home sitting in a high school auditorium watching these stories. And so when I got cast, I was over the moon. I promptly quit the basketball team I was on because I was a terrible basketball player. The nuns thought it would be good for the team if I was on, but I was terrible. And so I was in this production and I just loved everything about it. I had a really hard time learning to sing in harmony. It was very painful and I would sometimes cry at rehearsals and stuff, but get me up there on stage and I was so happy. I felt like I was, what do you say, a duck to water. And I remember the day it was over and we had a little party, I think the Monday after it was over. It played for 2 weekends. And one of the nuns came, I was sitting by myself at a table, and one of the nuns came over and said, "You look sad, William." They call me William. And I said, "Well, I'm sad it's over." And she goes, "Think of all the fun things you can do now. You can just play with your friends. You can, you don't have to come to rehearsals and you don't have to worry about being here." And I was like, "But I loved being here." And I was really sad. Then I just got obsessed with musical comedies. And I realized by doing the play, this is how that the stage musical, that there were songs in the stage musical that weren't in the movie. And I was fascinated by this. I had no idea.
So how old are you when that's happening? Are you still?
I'm 13, and I remember. Wow. I remember reading the script and seeing the breakdown of props and the sets and the character lists and I just was I was fascinated by the whole process of putting things being put together. And then like, I only knew them as movies. And then to find out that like that there was another whole show that existed that was the Sound of Music play. So I got the album, sang along with that, learned all those songs, wore it out. Then I think then I started like wanting to collect them, and I joined, those of us of a certain age will remember, Columbia Record Club.
Oh, yeah.
You just signed up and they sent you got 12 free albums, and then they sent you an album every month. And so I got all these musicals, and then I started going to New York with a teacher to see musicals, and then I was just obsessed. I became obsessed
So
with.
did you take up singing also? Did you have an interest in vocal training or anything like that?
I was always in the choir. I was always like running around staging musicals in my living room, playing the albums full blast when no one else was home, and running up and down stairs and acting all the parts out. And then, found friends that I turned on to these things. I discovered Stephen Sondheim. I became obsessed with him. And then I, in high school, started getting cast as the leads in some of these musicals, and things that I never heard of, like a place called The Apple Tree and Minnie's Boys, and other show. And then I was just obsessed with the putting shows together, and the way this teacher worked. He said, if you're just here to be on stage, you're a glory seeker, and I don't want glory seekers in my drama club. I want people who are going to be committed to like working backstage. And some shows you'll be on stage, sometimes you'll be backstage. And I took that to heart. So I was like tech director of shows and going to work parties on Saturdays in buildings. I just was all in. And then came time to go to college, and I tried to be in the music department for a year as a singer, and then I just got gravitated towards the theater department. And I was wanting to be an actor and a singer. So I started kind of majoring that, taking lots of classes in high school. I went to Sarah Lawrence College.
Oh, good college for that.
Yeah, those were my last 2 years, and I met a lot of people, and I came into my own as a singer, and I was cast in this kind of song night cabaret show, and everybody was talking about me, and I was like, going to go to New York, and I got involved with the theater troupe at La Mama and started acting there, and then one thing led to another, and I was appearing off Broadway and things as a singer and as an actor.
But this is in your like early 20s.
This is in my early 20s.
College.
And then I just got disillusioned with the world of trying to be an actor. And
in theater, right? You just
theater.
stayed in theater.
Strictly concentrated on theater. This is always was my dream, like to be on Broadway. That was my dream. But I remember it so clearly. There were two key things that happened to me as an actor. One, I was doing a monologue, and it was going really well, and the people that I was auditioning for started laughing, and I completely couldn't remember my lines and like bombed the audition. I just went blank. And then another time I went and sang the hell out of like Bridge Over Troubled Water or something. And I remember these two women sitting there and saying, that was so wonderful. Please know that if we don't cast you, it's simply because there isn't anything that we think you're right for in this show, but you are just wonderful. And I didn't take that as affirmation. I took it like, what the hell do I have to do to get a job in this town? And a paying job. I mean, I was working with friends and doing all this stuff, restaurant jobs, and it just became too much. And then I was taking an acting class, and in order to get in good with the teacher, who I wasn't really connecting with as an acting teacher, he needed a stage manager. So he said, we need a stage. So I didn't even know what stage managers did. I mean, I kind of had done enough plays to know that there were stage managers, but he said, okay, I need you to schedule these things. And I did things, and he was like, you're really good at this. And I was like, and he was like, and so then he offered me free acting classes in exchange for stage managing 2 productions. And there was some sense of relief of not having to be in front of the audience anymore, and seeing people that I thought were super talented and more talented than me, and being able to like support their work and make sure the rehearsals were run properly and that the productions happened and the light and the sound cues happened at the right time in order to sort of support this. And I just then fell in love with theater all over again, and I was kind of ready to bail on it and like go to school and become a therapist or something. It was something I thought
It's
about.
always an option.
Yeah, a lot of actors do that. It's so crazy. And then I talked to a couple people that I knew from Sarah Lawrence, one person in particular, and she was like, and she was stage managing at the Public Theater. And she was like, well, why I'm doing this show off of Broadway at West, Beth, why don't you come and just, I need an assistant. I need somebody to run, to be on deck with the actors, to be backstage with the actors. And she was out front calling cues. And I kept finding, she kept discovering me doing things that she was about to ask me to do. She would
Intuition.
she would clock it. She was like, I was just going to tell you to turn off that light, and you turned off that light. And I was like, yeah. So we just clicked, and then she hired me to work with the non-equity interns, paid interns. They were learning acting at Shakespeare and Company up in Lenox, Massachusetts, which was on the grounds of the Edith Wharton estate, the Mount, and run by these two amazing women, Tina Packer and Kristen Linklater. And I just, went up there for the summer and was kind of running the scheduling the interns, and we did a production. And, I just kind of sort of clicked with everybody, including a woman who was staying in the house next door to where we were staying, who was a very successful stage manager in New York. And I would hang out with her and we'd talk. And she was about to do a job at Manhattan Theater Club for John Patrick Shanley. He was written and directed this play. And this was post Moonstruck. So he was like a really big deal. And she was like, yeah, it's a little job. It's a small theater. It's not much money. You could be my assistant. And that was my first union job in Manhattan. And I was 32 at this point. I was very happy to be there, would do anything that was asked of me. And I was in the room with like John Turturro and John Patrick Shanley and Santo Laquas, these designers and actors and directors. And I was at Manhattan Theater Club, which was probably still in a golden age, but they were just entering their kind of like golden age of like the hit after hit, shows moving, from to commercial off-Broadway productions. And it was like, that was my dream come true to be like working on those kind of productions. And they all fell in love with me at Manhattan Theater Club. And so I started getting other jobs assisting the stage manager and then other stage managers. And then, then I was just like, I'm going to pursue this as a career now. Prior to that, I was like working off Broadway and performance art spaces as a stage manager. And I did something that I never did as an actor. I said, I won't do it unless I get paid. Because when I was acting, I would just do it.
Good job.
And I would like, okay, what's the salary? Well, we have some offstage parts that we thought, and stage directions that we thought could raise. Like, no, if there's no money, I'm not doing it. And that became like a real sort of, I loved doing it. That just created a boundary and a line that I just didn't even think about. I was just not going to cross that. And then so then one thing led to another at Manhattan Theater Club, and then I started getting jobs like at regional theater. Olympia Dukakis had a theater in Montclair, New Jersey, and I stage managed there a couple times. I was just really like this kind of game, sort of, smart, funny, very organized, very committed, very passionate to doing theater. And people just responded to me. Unlike in acting where I was told, oh, we love you, but there's nothing right for you. Stage managers is the exact opposite. People like you and they like working with you. They will hire you for the next one and the next one. So I got
That's lovely of loyalty.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Phil, inform the audience. These are people listening who don't know about theater. You never went to the New York Times and found these jobs, right?
Oh, no, it
Or
was
like
all
the Voice,
through.
the Village Voice want ads.
No,
No.
no, I never did that. It was all through because I never stopped doing theater from the time I was 13, really. So I was doing it in college. The people I went to college with were doing it in New York, and that's how I was getting all my jobs, was kind of just through people that knew people and who knew me. And then once you start working in a more organized theater community, I mean, I really tried when I was first trying to break into Broadway. I would drop my resume off at stage doors and say, I would love the chance to work with you and please keep me. And I never heard back from anybody. What happened at Manhattan Theater Club was, and then I also worked at Playwrights Horizons. I worked at the New York Shakespeare Festival. I did the outdoor Shakespeare in Central Park. I was on tour with a play about Truman Capote with Robert Morse. And I went back to Shakespeare and Company several summers. People at Manhattan Theater Club liked me, so they would set me up with meetings with other stage managers and directors. And that's when I met Joe Mantello. He was doing this production of a Terrence McNally play called Love, Valor, Compassion. And he was transitioning from being an actor to a director. He had just done the original production of Angels in America on Broadway, and he was kind of a big deal and somebody that I kind of really was sort of a little bit starstruck meeting. And we just hit it off really quickly, and we found it really easy to talk to each other. And so he hired me to do Love, Valor, Compassion at Manhattan Theater Club, which was very successful. At Manhattan Theater Club, transferred to Broadway, and
Did you
won the
go with
Tony Award
you
for
went
Best
with it
Play.
to Broadway, Billy? You went to Broadway too
Yes,
with the
yes.
show. Oh, wow.
So that was that was how I got to Broadway. I did a play for the theater company that I'd been working with for years. This play was very successful. They moved this play to Broadway, and we all went along. There was no question that they were just, of course you're coming. I said, well, I've never done Broadway. They were like, well, of course you're coming. You're part of this show. You're part of this team. So that was how I got to Broadway. And with somebody like Joe Mantello, who was embarking on a very sort of, what's the word, rocket-like launch of a career, I was in good company. And also Terrence McNally, who is, multi-Tony Award-winning playwright. And so the next show I did on Broadway was Masterclass, the show about Maria Callas that he had written. And then once you start, once you once I started working on Broadway and I didn't screw it up, and I kept my wits about me, and I didn't burn bridges and stuff, you become a person that those people that you've worked for call again and again and again. And that's what happened. That's how, and it all really started with a little kid, 13-year-old kid, running around his living room, acting out the parts in The Sound of Music and singing along at the top of his lungs. And my mother goes, "Would you be quiet?"
Stop moving around, William. So take us through, not very few people know this side of theater, and myself included. And, there are various levels of this. So you start, the regional and the friends and the college friends, and you kind of do a lot of off Broadway, then off Broadway, then, yeah, you made it to Broadway. This is a pretty intense job, isn't it? I mean, it's not a light, like I pushed the button and the curtain went up and I was sleeping for 10 hours. You're about that.
Well, it starts with the rehearsal process when someone decides they're doing a play, either a not-for-profit organization or a producer. There's a script, there's a director, there's designers to design the set, costumes, lighting, sound, compose music. Sometimes there's video, slide, projections and stuff like that to put all, and all these people are hired many weeks, sometimes months, sometimes years prior to the actual start of rehearsals. And one of the people that is hired as a stage manager. And so the stage manager is then going to facilitate the collaboration that is now in progress. And that means that then there'll be a cast. Sometimes the play is being done because someone is doing a role, but often, you're doing a play and then there's a cast. And then the stage manager is in charge of then contacting the cast, contacting the designers, staying in touch with the general managers, producers, and, organizing the rehearsals that are about to happen. And rehearsals rarely happen on stage. Rehearsals happen in a big loft somewhere, or sometimes a small room somewhere where everybody crams in, and you do like a mock-up taped out floor plan on the studio floor of the set. And sometimes you have walls that come in, and you bring in furniture and props and sometimes costume pieces, and everybody starts to read the play together, learn the show, learn the music, learn the choreography, and then and the stage manager is scheduling every moment of every single day. So that involves, like, if there's costume fittings that have to happen before or concurrent with rehearsals, then that has to be scheduled by the stage manager. The times that each actor is called, because not every actor is in every scene, so sometimes it's working very closely with the director. In the case of a musical choreographer and musical director, saying, I need these two people from 10 to 12. And then it's like, but I need those two people from 11 to 12. So then it's like, okay, so you can have them from 10 to 11:30, and then you can have them from 11:30 to 1. And then you're just constantly scheduling people's days. And in a big musical, there's upwards of 30 people. The last play I did had 4 people, so the logistics become exponentially harder the more people that are involved and the more elements that are involved, like singing. And then there's then a band, orchestra would come into it, and, choreography and costumes. And so the stage manager is basically scheduling every step along the way of how these things come together, and running the days and making sure the days happen on time. There are breaks that have to happen. There are certain rules that happen to be followed about who can be called when, how much time. If you've got kids involved, they have to be tutoring needs to be scheduled. I mean, it's just a big
That's huge stuff. Are you also watching the budget and the budgetary element?
That is something that I do not have to worry about. There's production managers and company managers and general managers who are keeping track of the budget. I'm basically just speaking for the artistic staff and saying they need this. The director wants this. The set designer is asking for this. And, hopefully it's getting approved. The beauty of getting farther up in the food chain, as it were, is that you usually, like, if a director and a star, and like I did a show with Dolly Parton, if people with that kind of notoriety who are actually on many levels selling the tickets, when they ask for things, it's usually easy to get them. In other situations, you can have a fight on your hands for every single penny that you ask for. But I don't have to keep track.
You're not worried about that. Good. Thank God.
Deliver the goods so that the creative process can continue.
Well, that's a huge event. Huge.
Yeah.
And so it could be months or years before the show is gonna be on stage that you start this process.
Usually you don't rehearse more than a couple months, but the planning stages for, like, a musical that's being written, an original musical, can take years prior to kind of, you do readings, you do workshops, you try out songs, you try out scenes, you have small audiences come and kind of see what works and doesn't work. So yeah, it can become a process that spans many months.
So in your life now, how do you feel about the work you do now, all these years later? How do you feel about being a stage manager?
Well, in order to do the work that I came to love, And in the world that I loved being a part of, it involves living in New York City. And it involves going to Times Square.
Where else is it? Right.
6 days a week, and doing the same show 8 times a week, if you're lucky. The other part of a stage man, once the show is sort of put together and in front of an audience, if it's running for a while and it's a musical, people leave the show. New people have to be put in. New people have to be rehearsed. You have to not only be overseeing the day-to-day production of the show, the performances, but also the rehearsals that are happening to kind of seamlessly put these new people into an existing show. And that's when you rely on a team. I don't do this alone. There's sometimes two, always at least one, sometimes two, sometimes three, sometimes more assistants, kind of, managing this small little empire of the artistic endeavor. But it's as a friend of mine puts it, the stage manager is the first phone call. If an actor is sick and they're going to miss a show, the stage manager is called first. If there's a flood in the theater and the costumes are all wet and they need to be dried out before there can be another show, the stage manager is going to be the first person that's called. If anything is going down, anything is going wrong, if somebody's upset about something because of somebody not doing their job well or appropriately, the stage manager is called, because the stage manager is the representative of the producer, the director, and the entire creative team in the building, and they're all gone after opening night. They don't come around. It's all done by the stage manager, and the crew are maintaining, and the actors are maintaining the artistic product. And the stage manager is the person that's watching that and saying things as simple as, you're going too far stage left, you're half in your light now. Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay, thank you. I'll adjust that. Or you're playing that moment for a laugh, and that was never intended to be a laugh, so knock it off.
Huh.
And have to, depending on who you're dealing with, have to say it in a little nicer, sort of more diplomatic ways. It's like, that cue was late, why weren't you there with that prop to hand to that actor? So you're in charge of everything, and you do, the stage manager is to watch and has to be, because the buck stops there. It really, really does. It's like,
well, it's all your fault if it doesn't go well.
Yeah.
If it doesn't come off. So you're like the parent of the production.
Yes, you're like I used to say, doing a musical is a cross between running a factory and teaching kindergarten. And it really kind of is, because you have this dangerous machinery running around, sometimes 8 by 8 foot holes opening in the middle of the stage while another set piece comes up through it, and things coming on and off, sometimes very quickly, and actors, if they're in the way, can really get hurt. And then you're also dealing with, he's moving on my line and I'm not getting my laugh anymore.
Personalities.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, well, no, he's not. Well, I'm not getting my laugh. Well, I think it's because you're doing this, and you're both pretty, and let's move on. That's the kind of kindergarten part of it. And then the factory is just what I just said. So,
structure.
It's really interesting.
Like a circus, right? Kind of a circus.
Kind of a circus. And then sometimes it's just, when it's all going right and the audience is, leaning in to experience a show that I've helped create, and I'm backstage and I can feel it from backstage. Like the last show I did, Little Bear Ridge Road, I could feel the audience just get pulled into the emotional lives of these characters that have been meticulously crafted, by a director and a playwright and actors. There's nothing, for me, there is nothing like it. I get goosebumps now just talking about it, because it's so ephemeral, but it's so powerful. And I have a friend, and that's what kept me doing it for 30 years. And a friend of mine that is another stage manager said, you have to get a charge. You have to get some kind of lift when you walk through that stage door and you know you're going to do a Broadway show that night. If you're not getting that charge and that lift, then you're probably not going to last at the job because it's there's so much to it. And
Right.
it is 6 days a week, always being on call. You never like some phone calls you can't ignore. You just have to take. And it's 8 shows a week and it's the same thing.
That's grueling. Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
grueling, and New York City is grueling. And when you get to be 70 like I am, and New York City is a tough place to live, and it's hard to navigate, and it's expensive, and there are no trees or mountains or
No.
river. You have to if you at all become sort of like want nature back in your life,
Hmm.
it's not really a place that is going to give you that. So for me, I'm not sure that there's another one in the books for me. I think I may
Maybe.
just, you never know. You never say never. Other things have become, as I've moved out of the city and relocated up in the Hudson Valley, and
That's how I met you.
yeah,
I
very
wasn't
much.
seeing you backstage till I was. No one invited me.
Exactly.
So, Billy, you've had this tremendous career, and so you always had that feeling when you walked in the theater that you were getting something amazing, something really spectacular from the experience.
I was I felt like I was part of something that was bigger than me. And it really does go back to that kid looking at the back of a Broadway cast album and going, this show played the Lunt-Fontanne Theater for 1,442 performances. And there I am in the Lunt-Fontanne Theater doing a show.
Wow.
My office is in a dressing room backstage at the Royal Theater that Betty Davis dressed in.
Wow.
You're in that world. You're part of a community that goes back decades and decades. And then if you really want to extrapolate, it goes back thousands of years.
Yes,
And
thousands.
I just always felt like Broadway for me was the epicenter of what the theater that I loved came to love, and fell in love with as a teenager, and just never fell out of love with it. And so even on the days when it was like, oh, I can't believe I have to go in there was still something that I was like, you're in the theater where this happened, or this theater was where they Richard Rodgers wrote Oklahoma on that piano. I mean, it's like that kind of stuff.
That kind of
For
stuff.
me, it's just like, that's like
Magic.
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 It's a lifeblood.
Well, theater is so unique to an experience we can individually have that is visceral and interconnecting with ourselves and the audience. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I rarely talk about something I'm streaming on Netflix with family, but if I go to a show and there's a message in the show, which I kind of love,
Mhm.
man, I'll hold on to that. It's the magic, the elixir of how to move forward in my life. And I look for
Mhm.
that in a show. So how does anybody find you? Do they go to the back door and go, is Billy Barnes here in this show? Or because I want to
Well,
get an autograph.
if you've seen the show and you look in the playbill and you see my name and you come around to the stage door and say, am here, I would like to see, is Billy Barnes available? The stage doorman would announce, and I would probably come down and say, or I would send my assistant and say, go find out who that is. But yeah, I mean
That's
and people
theater.
have done that. People just drop things off. I'm a young stage manager looking for work, and you know, could I take you out for coffee, or could I trail you backstage or
That's
something like that?
something that people still do in theater.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Oh,
And
so
I
it's
have
so
done that for
personal.
people. I've done that for people, and it's It's great to meet a young person where you see yourself, you see their passion and their excitement about the work, and it's very easy to tell what they're there for. And yeah, there have been people just in the past few months that I've encouraged and passed along their resumes and said, I met this guy and this kid, and I think you'd really like him. I think his heart is in the right place for doing theater.
Well, I was right about you. You are sweet. There's the sweet. I just had a vibe. The cause that I'm here to celebrate is that people get to find their path, and it really, you're not, it does. What I do, and this is not my livelihood, the podcast, but it's my avocation, it's my passion, is I do something that I love doing. And when you find what you love doing and you actually get paid for it, oh my gosh, I wake up and I'm like, I don't have to go to work anymore. I'm not going to work. I'm going to do me. I'm going to have my life. It's amazing, the difference. It's amazing. Yeah. So thank you for doing this today. And so shows that you want to tell us a couple of shows people might want to check out if they're interested in shows you yourself would recommend.
I just saw this play called Marjorie Prime. It's about AI and robotics trying to replace your deceased loved ones. And it's that makes it sound awful and sort of, it's very sci-fi, but it's very human. And it just brings up a lot of things about where we're at in terms of AI. Oddly enough, it was written several years ago, I think in the early teens, but it was just a very small, beautiful, driven by great acting and a great script. I would love to tell you could come see Little Bear Ridge Road, but that we're no longer on the boards, as it were. I mean, Hamilton is great and one of the best things I've ever seen. And, there's that great line, I want to be in the room where it happens, which is kind of like the way a lot of us feel about being lucky to be at different shows. And there's a play called Bug with Carrie Coon that's, I'm sure, very good. I know the play. I'm sure this will be a good production.
Great. All right. Great. I made a list.
Yeah.
Two, not all. So it was just a lovely, I feel like when I talk to someone, I'm learning things I'd never learn any other place in the world. But when people are so generous to come and tell their story,
Sure.
I will, I'll every time I go to a play. Now you may think you're done, but there's some regional theater up in, this area where you now live.
Yeah, you never know.
You never know what's going to pull you back in.
I may go back to acting, or I may want to direct or something.
Well,
it's just
yeah.
You never know. You never know.
You never know.
Things happen.
All right. Well, and we shall see, I think, as the saying goes. Everything is possible. Everything changes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Billy.
Thank you.
William Joseph Barnes, Billy Barnes, to his all his fellow workers. Thank you for being here today. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in our town and in our local hangouts.
Yes.
Our ongoing journey of getting to know each other in other ways.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks, Billy. Have a good night. Take care. Bye. We want to thank the following people. Jennifer Maidman for original music. Listen to her on iTunes and Spotify. Drew English of Upstate Podcast Studio for sound and recording engineering. And all our executive producers. See you next time.